Chapter 23. Grassina gestured and more witches' lights began to glow, the light soft and diffuse. Edric's stomach rumbled and a crimson fog floated around the room. He blushed and his face turned nearly the same color as the fog. Edric ate the seeds inside the magic beans, I said, certain that was all the explanation my aunt needed. Grassina shook her head sadly, although a smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. You shouldn't have eaten those seeds, Edric. Those were old magic beans, and their magic gets stronger with age. Every month for the rest of your life you'll probably return when the moon is full. My grandfather was known as Aldred the Wise. My father was Lionel the Courageous, and yet the man I might marry one day could be called Edric the Flatulent. Edric groaned when his stomach grumbled, and I couldn't keep from smiling. What a time to realize that I did want to marry him. I think I'll just go down to the kitchen, Edric said, heading for the door. It's been a while since we ate. Emma, are you coming? No, I need to stop and help Aunt Grassina. I settled into my usual chair in front of the fireplace. Grassina joined me in the other chair, and we waited until Edric had closed the door behind him. When my aunt sighed, I knew something was wrong. Father will be all right, won't he? I asked. Oh, yes, this has nothing to do with your father. It's just that I'm not sure I'm doing the right thing about Haywood. What are you saying? You don't want him back the way he was? Of course I do, or at least I think I do, but what if we've changed so much that we don't like each other anymore? Or what if we've discovered that we've fallen out of love? I'm no longer a young girl who fell in love with a romantic young wizard in training. I've had a lot of time to think about this. It took me much longer than I thought it would to find Haywood. And when I did, Mother had already made him forget that he was human, just as she said she would. He was happy as an otter, happier than most men are. What right did I have to bring him back to life as a human? He's happy as an otter because of Grandmother's spell, you know that. But he'll be happier with you. I saw the way he looked at you when you found him the other day. He'd even carved your name in the bark of an old oak, even though it might have been terribly difficult for an otter. He loves you, Aunt Grassina, and if he was in his right mind, he'd tell you so. Grassina held up her hand, showing me the wrapping staining with blood. He bit me, Emma. When I finally found him, he bit me like a wild animal. It was Grandmother's spell. I know the real Haywood loves you. Grassina sighed again. Perhaps you're right, Emma. I know so little about affairs of the heart. It's been too long. She closed her eyes and rubbed her temples as if in pain, but when she looked at me again, she seemed a little more cheery. If we're going to go through with this, we'd better get busy. Dawn will be here before we know it. While Grassina started toward her room to fetch the items from the silver chest, I reached into my pouch for the bottle of dragon's breath. I was about to take it out when I heard a rustling by the window. I gasped when Grandmother shot through the opening. Hopping off her broom, she pointed a finger at Grassina. There you are. Did you find him? Grassina turned her head and glared. What are you doing here? I've come to keep you from making a terrible mistake. The only mistake I've ever made was letting you near Haywood again, said Grassina. I should have known better than to ask for your help. Is that any way to talk to your mother? In your case, yes. Please leave. Grandmother muttered something as she squinted, her tiny eyes nearly disappearing in a mass of wrinkles. Grassina must have guessed what her mother was up to because she put a hand in front of her face and recited something very fast. With a high-pitched whistle, Grandmother's spell bounced off Grassina and attached itself to its creator. Furious, Grandmother clawed at her lips, tearing away strands of something thick and white that seemed to writhe in her hands. Why, you little pipsqueak, shrilled my grandmother as soon as she'd uncovered her mouth. You restore Henry and your life will change forever. I hope so, Mother, and his name is Haywood. This is for your own good, daughter, screamed Grandmother as she hurled a ball of tangled white strands at Grassina. My aunt ducked and the ball splattered against the wall behind her. Mother, I'm warning you, you aren't going to change my mind. Let's bring Howard here and see what he thinks, Grandmother muttered something and made clockwise circles with her hands. A puff of orange smoke clouded the corner of the room, and when it cleared, Haywood stood blinking in the light. Grandmother spoke again, and a dozen wasps buzzed through the window, heading straight for the otter. If I hadn't known the strength of my spell, I might have been convinced. Haywood! Screamed Grassina as he snapped and batted at the wasps. Without thought for her own safety, my aunt rushed to help him. The moment Grassina turned her back, Grandmother pointed at her and muttered. It must have been a binding spell, for my aunt froze mid-step. Her body trembled as she fought to break the spell. Harvey isn't worth the breath it takes to say his name, my grandmother shrilled. I don't know why you're being so thick-headed. Because she loves him, I said, surprising even myself. I couldn't bear it any longer. My grandmother had done everything she could to stand in the way of true love, and even that hadn't been enough for her. You may have fooled Gracina, but I know that's not Haywood. He's still right where I put him, and that's where he'll stay until we're ready. Your tricks aren't going to work with me, so you might as well stop now." Grandmother grumbled and waved her arm. The false images of otter and wasp began to fade. "What you're doing is wrong, Grandmother," I continued. "Can't you see that they should be together?" My grandmother's eyes flashed. "I see. So you've learned a little magic, and you think you can interfere. Well, this is none of your business. This is between my daughter and me." With a flick of her fingers, silver sparks shot from their tips, sizzling as they burned the air. Keep it simple, I thought, and a spell formed in my mind almost effortlessly. The wind must blow, it can't be slow, put out each spark, and leave no mark. A sudden gust of wind shook tapestries on the walls, whipped my hair around my head, blew the loose parchments off Gracina's desk, and turned the sparks into fizzling dust that fell harmlessly to the floor when the wind died down. "Very nice," exclaimed Grandmother, and suddenly I had the impression that she was somehow pleased. "Now how about this?" I was surprised to see her vanish, but even more surprised that I could still sense her presence in the room. "I know you're still here, Grandmother. Hasn't this gone on long enough?" When she didn't answer, I said, "Fine. If that's the way you're going to act, then let's try this. Let each life here give off a glow to help me learn what I must know." My skin tingled and the air around me began to shimmer like a golden aura formed around my aunt and Lil. I blinked, and when I looked again, I saw a glowing light roughly my grandmother's size and shape. The light moved, and I heard my grandmother laugh. "Very good. Maybe we'll make a witch of you yet." Somehow, what had started as a fight between my aunt and my grandmother had ended up feeling like a test for me. From the tone of my grandmother's voice, it seemed that I had passed. A blue mist floated through the door, and my grandmother materialized in the middle of the room. And my grandfather materialized in the middle of the room. "Back so soon, Olivine? You stay away for years, and now you visit twice in 1 week." My grandmother reappeared with a small pop. "Mind your own business, you old fool," she said, her bristling eyebrows drawing together in a V. "This is between me and my granddaughter. She's my granddaughter, too. Leave her alone, Olivine. She doesn't need you interfering in her life. And I don't need your advice, Aldred. I was leaving anyway. I've already said what I wanted to say and learned what I wanted to learn." Grandmother smiled at me, then turned to waggle her fingers at Gracina. My aunt's foot hit the floor with a thump, and she staggered a step or two. "Then why are you still here?" asked Grandfather. "I'm not," Grandmother said, hopping onto her waiting broom. She flew out of the room, cackling like an old hen and making us duck to avoid her. When she flew out of the window, a full moon framed her silhouette. Grandfather shook his head. "That woman gets crazier every time I see her." "I heard that!" Grandmother shouted over her shoulder, her voice fading with distance. "Thank you for stopping by, Father, although I could have handled it myself," said Gracina. "I was running through the standard releases for binding spells. I would have broken it soon, and then I could have taken care of Mother." "I know, but I wanted to see her, even if it was just for a minute. She has the personality of a crazed she-bear, but I miss her all the same. Nice or nasty, your grandmother has always been the most exciting woman I've ever known. It isn't her fault that she turned mean. Good night, ladies. Come visit me when you can." Gracina waited until Grandfather dematerialized, then raised her eyebrows and turned to me. "So what have you been doing? Your magic has improved more than I would have thought possible in such a short time." "It was the magic miasma at the Dragon Olympics," I said. "It seems that when you do magic—" "Never mind," she said, shaking her head and smiling. "It sounds like quite a long story. I want you to tell me all about it when we actually have time. Right now we better see to Haywood. The sun will be up before we know it." I followed my aunt to her workbench. Taking out a small clay bowl, Gracina dropped in one of Shirley's feathers, Nasia Nautica's gossamer hair, and the husk of the magic bean. Lil watched every move, her head swiveling back and forth. I handed Gracina the bottle of dragon's breath. She shook it and said, "Solids become liquids, liquids turn to gas. Reverse the process with my next pass. Make this gas a liquid for an hour or maybe 2. Return it to its present form when its work is finally through." When she waved the bottle over the bowl once more, the contents sparkled, becoming so bright that I had to look away. "I find that liquids are much easier to use in some circumstances, gases in others. In this case," she said, holding up the bottle so I could see the blue-green fluid inside, "a liquid is much handier. Now watch." Slowly tilting the bottle, Gracina poured in 3 drops, waited a moment, then poured in another 3. My heart beat 1, 2, 3 times. Then the liquid dragon's breath grew hot, bubbling like lava in the dragon's pool, and the feather, the hair, and the bean husk curled into tight little balls before dissolving. The liquid, now a creamy blue, was light and frothy with bubbles rising and falling. "Good," said Gracina, setting a lid on the bowl. "Now we're all set." Recapping the bottle, she handed it to me before picking up the potion. "Keep that bottle safe. There's no telling when you might need it next, and it was probably very difficult to get." You have no idea, I thought. When I saw her secret little smile, I thought maybe she did after